So, if you could, like, bear with me here, ask a tropical fish, hey, what do you think of, like, oh, you live in these warm waters. What do you think of, like, the Arctic waters of the deep? And what do you think of dark, deep waters? If he could respond, I think the fish's respond would be, what's water? What's up, y'all? My name is Propaganda. I am a hip-hop artist, one half of the Red Couch podcast, and an artist in residence here at Preemptive Love. And I want to talk to you about some things here. In recent news, we saw, an image surface of the governor of Virginia donned in blackface next to someone dressed in a Ku Klux Klan outfit. Pretty shocking, and Governor first came out and apologized about it, expressed that that's not who he is. Then he kind of came back and said, wait a minute, maybe that's not me. And then, upon further discussion, started talking about ways that he can sort of rectify that and prove penance, right? At the same time, a story came out of Liam Neeson discussing a tragic event in his life, and when it happened that when he left the house, he was just so infuriated. He was just looking for the first, black person he can find and just kind of, beat the tar out of him. Then a funny twist, he said he started power walking. Somehow that calmed him down, which is a whole other story. Naturally speaking, the first response is to attempt to sort of adjudicate what happened right there. And of course, knee-jerk reactions are completely understandable. It's a very jolting statement. And it's also very jolting images. And I'm pairing these two together for a reason, and get to that a little later. I imagine the response, and I see the response as very natural, attempting to say, oh, I'm outraged, I'm hurt, you need to make this right, explain yourself. Should he step down? Should he not step down? How could he prove that he's not who he says he is? How can Liam Neeson sort of redeem his story? If he's expressing he's not a racist, then, make us understand, help us square this circle. And these images and statements are very triggering. I have family that left certain parts of the country because of expressed rage, like Liam Neeson would say, or just feeling as though, there's no safe haven if even my governor participates in such acts. I don't understand how I can trust you. In a time that's so sort of polarizing, it's really hard to keep people at the table when you want to talk about various hot buttons or hot takes of culture, because some words are just so triggering, and it's such an arduous task to keep people at the table, so much so that nobody even hears what each other are saying. How do you talk about tough things and still keep people at the table? And I don't have an answer, but I'm going to attempt to do it right now. So back to the fish motif. Fish doesn't consider the water because that's just the world it's in. And when you're just in it, you kind of don't think about it unless what you're in becomes toxic. Then you begin to notice it. I'm not so concerned specifically about the governor of Virginia. I'm more interested in this idea that this is just the water we swim in. The water's called white supremacy. And I know that's such a triggering word, but I just need you to think about this for a second. Let's throw a rock anywhere in the American narrative, history, and culture. I mean, there was a time when, like, the Irish weren't even welcome here. When we look at the Constitution, when he talked about all men being creative equal, like, just a cursory understanding of just your past is they meant white men over the age of 25. That's who they meant when they said these were who the equals were. In the same documents, our native brothers and sisters are referred to as savages. And that comes from the doctrine of discovery way centuries before that said that if you wage war with indigenous people, those murders don't count because they're not murders, because they're not necessarily image bearers. How else can you get your brain around the subjugation of an entire nation of people as your workforce and call them chattel? That's the 3/5 compromise. Africans aren't necessarily humans. This is just the waters we're in. Pick any social revolution in our culture, whether it's women's suffrage or the civil rights or the abolishing of slavery. This is us trying to get our land to understand that we are equal or should be equal in the sight of the law. It's just, why do you have to fight that? It's because there's an understanding that these other groups are inferior to these groups. That's just the waters we're in. Here's another example. Someone asked, like, how come the African American community never reached any sort of economic success and independency. Well, we tried in Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You know, it was set on fire. In my own family, my father coming home from the Vietnam War with the GI Bill attempting to buy a house. But there was a thing called redlining. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. It hindered Black families from moving into certain parts of the neighborhood. This is my own father. Like, that's not that long ago. And even in towns that we were allowed to live in, we were denied home loans because that community didn't want Black people. They didn't want Black families in their community. This stuff happened. Why would you not want Black families in your neighborhood? Well, it's because there's an understanding that Black families tear down the property value. Guys, we didn't choose the hood. When I was in 5th grade, a young man told me that he thought Black people were made by God smearing them with feces. And I'm supposed to just take this as a joke. And when my parents took it to the principals, they were saying, well, that's just kids being kids, which made me understand, oh, I'm not safe here. Bullying towards me doesn't matter. The Me Too movement is our queens of our culture trying to tell us there's something in the water that's not right. There's something you're not noticing. We are swimming in the same ocean, and there's something you're not noticing about this water. At some point, we have to stop and say, maybe there is something wrong with the water. And inside of these oceans are icebergs. And if you know anything about an iceberg, you know that what's on top of the water pales in comparison to the size of what's under the water. And all of us can agree when we see things on top of the water, i.e., somebody donned in a Klan's uniform, somebody taking a picture in blackface, that's a problem. But what's hard for us to get to is understanding how a person got to that moment. And how those things got there are things that were just a joke. Different side comments, different moments, different microaggressions that if the water is toxic to you, then it's not hard for you to connect the idea that this iceberg is in fact just the tip of the iceberg. There's more happening here. There's something in the water. So I'm not so concerned about lopping off the top of the iceberg. I'm more concerned about the toxicity of the water. This is why I believe things like Liam Neeson's statements and these pictures that surfaced from a Virginian governor are in the same ocean. So I think it's our job as those that want to love anyway, those that consider themselves peacemakers, to not so much be headhunters, to not so much play whack-a-mole every time somebody steps out of line. That's not my interest. My interest is the toxicity of the water. Let's start considering the things that we're putting in waters. Let's start considering how we can train our gills to discern when we're taking in toxic thoughts, toxic understandings of each other. The water needs to start tasting funny to us. Because I believe when the water starts tasting funny, I think that's when change happens. Should this man go find 40 Black pastors and repent to them? Hey, if every person who struggled with institutional racism or have had some sort of racist thought had to knock on my door here and repent to me, I'd never get anything done. If we were to go through all of our U.S. government and find everyone who has committed some sort of questionable racist, sexist, or misogynistic act, I don't know who would be left in office. I don't say this as an excuse for their actions, but as evidence of the ocean. We need to consider the waters we swim in. We need to consider maybe it's not toxic to me, but it's toxic to my neighbor. And let me push you further. If it's toxic to my neighbor, it's probably toxic to me too. Let's breathe better water.